Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Scare Your Friends podcast. I'm John, a.k.a. Skillfully, and I am joined with my friends Dylan, Kevin, Caitlin, and Dan. 2020, guys, it's been a thing, right?
Money, 2020. It's a great way to start, Dill. I would just, if I don't want to hijack this at all, but I just want to say I want to be actually incredibly insincere. It's sincere right now. I'm sorry.
It's different.
I had a beer. That's what happens. No, we're not to date this. We're recording this in November 2020. We've been on a long hiatus, and
It's the day after Halloween.
it's the day after
Which is
Halloween.
important for what we're reading today.
And I just want to say I'm happy that everyone that we know is still healthy and okay. And I'm ecstatic that we're doing this again, given everything going on in the world. And I hope everybody that's listening out there is also okay and coping. So that's all I want to say.
Excellent start. What about you, Dylan? What's going on with you? It's been
2020's happened, obviously, but like Dan said, good thing is, everyone's been safe, healthy, and all that. Hopefully, practicing social distancing, unlike what we're doing right now.
This is a PS. Okay, well, shit, Dylan. Fuck.
You could have faked it.
Yeah,
We're
for
sitting
real.
6 feet apart.
Jesus
and we're all
Christ.
wearing masks.
Yeah.
The mic's just that good.
Just masks, though. Nothing else.
Yeah.
So imagine that.
It's definitely what's keeping the table up.
Okay.
And Kevin and Caitlin, they've had a big year because
I've done nothing.
They've done absolutely nothing.
Nothing has changed.
Oh, really?
What?
Dan, where are we recording this from right now?
Well, they got an apartment together, and I also moved in with William in case nobody.
also,
anybody
Dylan
cares.
moved too.
Dylan
Literally,
also moved.
I just want to say, honestly,
John, you're still living at home with your parents like a fucking loser.
Yes, that is true. Thank you.
We're recording from the new Scare Your Friends podcast recording
It's not
studio.
recording.
The new studio that we
New
have
studio.
with all the money that we made from this production.
Thank
Look
you,
at all this
everyone.
wonderful art we have put up.
Thank you, everyone who's donated to Patreon. Everyone listening is like, oh, they have a Patreon? No, look for it. There's no Patreon. Oh.
We made that joke in the Ashley, Kansas.
Oh, did
I
we?
really,
Did
yeah,
Yeah, we did.
we really shouldn't be making that joke because eventually.
We'll end up having
People
to
are going to
make
start asking, and then
No.
they're going to force John's hand.
He says no, but it means yes.
Anyway, this episode's sponsored by MeUndies.
Oh my god.
You would fucking forget this.
All right, so
Made 100% with micromodal.
Please stop.
Oh,
Caitlin,
fuck.
how are you, dear?
I don't know. I'm not sure yet.
yeah, we bring Caitlin along on these things.
We don't bring Caitlin along. This is her
This
fucking
is my
house.
apartment.
I know, yeah, but like,
Yeah, can we talk about that now? It's just like glossed over it. Like, it's not a big deal. Nothing happened. Me and Caitlin got married, and some
Yay.
dumbass married us.
Yeah, some
And
dumb.
yeah,
Hey,
some
Dylan.
dumb parishioner.
I don't know what they're talking about.
It's fucking wild, man. It's wild how easy it is to get ordained. They'll just give it to fucking anybody.
And I didn't even
clearly.
do it.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
do
he
it
wasn't
for
even
me.
there. People
Wait,
did
is
it
this
for him.
like is there like a board that like could hear this recording and be like, he never took the test?
Yeah.
Taking away his license,
John,
The fucking-
and their marriage is void.
No, John, let me put it this way. My other friend who's getting married in January, he texted me. He's like, weird question. Are you ordained? I'm like, give me 5 minutes. And I text him back. I'm like, yeah, I'm ordained.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's that
I
easy.
texted Dylan. I'm like, where do I go? Oh, okay.
It's that easy.
And I'm like, there you go. I just signed in a contact form. Like, I'm trying to find out more about a product online.
Yeah,
My friends from school were like, what's your email address? I'm like, I'm not giving it to you because you're just going to sign me up for this thing.
Yeah.
And I told them, and they're like, come on, please. I'm like, and my friend Paula, she's like, yeah, I know your email, so I'm going to do it anyway. I'm like, okay, I'll have to marry you.
yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. I'm like, I'm just going to hold you to it now.
I mean, unfortunately I wasn't invited to the ceremony.
Unfortunately, no one was invited
Yeah, I
to
know,
the ceremony
I
because
know.
it was in my parents' backyard because of fucking COVID.
Yeah.
So,
It was family only.
family only, and then this bitch named Dan crashed it.
This bitch
Ate up
did.
all the food.
Didn't crash
all
it.
the hugs.
I got several text messages from several different people in our friends group asking me to show up.
But it wasn't from the bride and the groom.
But it wasn't from the bride.
So, technically, you did crash.
Okay, I guess.
Didn't even fucking bring a gift.
You were welcomed.
I didn't bring a gift.
we played
Don't even
Jenga.
pull that bitch. I'm the gift. because I'm a lot like your parents. I wish I kept the receipt.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Oh my god.
Jesus.
I don't know how to respond to that. I've talked about Jenga before.
Sorry, we're all pent up. We have a year worth of stories to tell, and this is going to be, if we do this regularly again, it's going to be interspersed throughout.
But I do want to say in all seriousness that it is good to be back.
Yeah.
Things have been difficult for some, and for a lot of people, myself included. And so I'm happy to be back, and I wouldn't be back if it wasn't for these people. So I genuinely am happy that they're here. And with that in mind, it is November 1st as we record this, and so while it may not be Halloween specifically...
Well, it's 2 days to hell, so...
Okay,
No.
Cut that out.
We're gonna have to cut that out.
Cut that out.
I don't want to hear that.
Hold on.
Yeah.
No, but John, it's Dia de los Muertos. It's Day of the Dead.
Oh,
so it makes sense.
That's right.
So just
right.
intercut that in there. Just overlap that.
I was about to be like, I'm just going to edit it with like, it's 2 days until Joe Biden or Donald Trump wins. Oh, my voice cracked there. All right. Well, we've gone on for like 7 minutes, so let's introduce the story.
That's about it.
So this was my plan because we were supposed to do one. I actually was going to try this last time we were together, which was last Sunday. Something happened, so we couldn't do it. But originally, I do the thing I always do when I don't have ideas. I always just go to the Slime Beast archives and see what I can whip up,
dude.
And
think for yourself, brother.
No, I'm kidding. No, I had a story in mind.
Slime Beast there.
I guess, but yeah, true.
Great.
We haven't lost a fucking beat. We haven't missed a step.
Great.
No,
I lost
originally
him as a listener. Now we're left with 2. It's me and Dan. Because John edits the whole thing. He's like, I don't want to listen to this again because I'm going to catch a mistake and it's already uploaded because I know that mentality. I'll listen to it, and you narcissist, will listen to it 4 times over.
So here's
okay, hold on. Wait, hang on. We want to get...
No, I'm trying to get us back on point, okay?
Right. So I thought that, okay, it's going to be Halloween weekend, and so I thought, we're coming back, it's Halloween weekend, we'll read a Halloween story. And the thing is, with a lot of creepypastas that are Halloween-themed or any sort of holiday-themed creepypastas, a lot of them are pretty garbage. But I found one that I think is pretty good. Okay. I'm just going to read the notes on it to start with.
I'm the judge of that.
So this is what the notes say. Mm-hmm. What you are about to read was posted on 4chan's paranormal board on Halloween Day 2013 by an unknown user by the name of Prozac101.
Oh, that's okay.
Being a daily visitor to the board, I was one of the first people to reply to the girl's post, and I think it's best that I tell you now that I was pretty creeped out by what I had read. Probably the most I had been in a long time. It's kind of hard for me to explain the strange feelings I got, but there was something quite different about her, due to the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about it for days after it had been first posted on the board. Just to make everything clear, I am not entirely the original author of this piece, just merely an anonymous editor that felt that it was his duty to share Prozac's story even further with the world. And so this was a last-minute idea that I came up with. I did read some of the comments on this story. There was a lot of people that said it was a really good story, 10 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, etc. I read some of the beginning of it. I think it's interesting. I did not finish it. I figure I would finish it together on the podcast. So we've seen that happen before. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I felt that this was an appropriate story to try and read for our first episode in almost a year.
Can I point down? I don't think you even said the name of this one.
It'll be on the title, too.
It'll be in the title, too, if I didn't. But, or I'll just edit it in right now. Out in the Woods. This story is Out in the Woods by Prozac101.
So I have a half-hour, 45-minute drive home. If this spooks me out, a lot, I'm gonna fucking hate you forever. I have to drive alone.
You're on a podcast called Scare Your Friends, though.
Yeah, but, it's fine when I'm with people and we're joking around, but the second I get in my car and drive down a pitch-black road for half an hour, that's when the dread kicks in. My headlights are on. There's no lights in the car.
Right, but the whole point of this exercise is to scare your friends.
Yeah, but you're not scaring us. You're cherry-picking stories to try to scare us. What do you even do here, honestly?
He hosts.
You just steal Slime Beast stuff. You just admitted it. and you just take other people's stories.
You're making John sad.
There it goes.
You're making John sad.
There it goes.
Is this still raining outside?
It might be. Oh God, that breeze was heavenly. Thank you. I'm so happy I insulted you now.
That's how I always feel when I say insult John.
All right. Well, first of all, fuck you, Dan. Second of all,
It's good to be back.
but I mean,
From our last episode.
Till 2021.
all right. Well, thanks for the vote of confidence, Dylan.
We're almost there. I mean,
Happy to help, John.
All right. But yeah, I think there's not really anything else that we need to really say here. So yeah, let's just get into reading it. Dylan, why don't you start reading? I don't think I've ever asked Dylan to start reading a story.
No, I'm not usually
So when you see, so by the way, the /X, by the way, is referring to the paranormal board of 4chan.
okay.
So just start there. Hey,
So, hey, paranormal board.
basically, yeah. All right, and so this is the story known as Out in the Woods.
Say board, right? Isn't that what you read before? Just call it board.
Out in the Woods.
No, I'm saying instead of the X.
/X.
The /X is
Just skip the goddamn X. Fuck it. Just
I don't know
go.
how many times it's going to say it. That's why I'm just making sure.
I don't know either.
Well, I just thought that I'd share a couple of spooky stories from my childhood to get everyone all hyped for Halloween. When I was a child, it was just me and my mother. We lived in a property owned by my grandma, a 3-story old farmhouse right at the fringe of the woods. It was far off the road down a long, unlit gravel driveway. It felt very isolated at night, being so distant from any other houses set in the area that hadn't been inhabited for 30 years before we started living in it. Quite often I was a fairly rambunctious child, so while my mom went off to work, I would occasionally skip the morning bus to school and stay home alone all day. The big house had a habit of feeling incredibly lonely and sparse, so I spent most of my time playing in the forest expanse out back, some distance into the woods, far enough that I couldn't hear my mother when she called. There was a toppled pine tree which had crashed into an even larger trunk on its way down. It was now frozen there, forming a long arc over the forest floor. I loved to climb up the jagged stump at the base of this fallen tree and then steady myself to a point just above the middle. I was never able to make it all the way to the top because it was just too steep for me to continue any further, and I had a bad habit of freaking out from how high up I was.
One day I was sitting in my usual spot on the fallen tree, which was a good distance from the ground, just listening to the birds singing and simultaneously feeling the warmth of the sun on my neck, when I heard something strange from underneath that paralyzed me in shock.
Hey, kid.
Oh boy.
Oh, I'm creeped out. I was gripped by a sudden strong surge of fear for a moment. The voice had come directly underneath me. I strained to look down, but couldn't see anything over the ledge. For a long time, I sat there in absolute silence, and I was at the point where I almost soon to convince myself that I had to manage hearing a man's voice at all.
I know you can hear me.
His voice was much louder this time, as I yelled something out and scrambled up the log a bit higher. Trembling nervously, I dug my fingernails into the bark and held tight for dear life. I sat there trying to collect my nerves for God knows how long. Although I couldn't see it, the presence of the thing underneath me was still clear. The bird song was much softer and more cautious this time, and when I listened closely, I swear I could hear the faintest echo of human breathing. Gathered all my courage, I vowed to prove to myself that it was all my imagination by leaning over the edge as far as I possibly could without slipping right off. Digging hard into the bark behind me, I stretched out along my arms and peered over, getting a full view of the empty forest floor and undergrowth when suddenly,
"Come down here, or I'll come up and I'll grab you."
Pedophile John there.
Jesus Christ.
It was so loud. It was as if it was being screamed right in my face. I released my grip on the tree in fright and plunged off the platform. I was saved only by grabbing a nearby branch, and for one awful second, my bare legs dangled in the cool air. When I pulled myself up, I ran at full speed to the top of the collapsed pine, to the point I had never reached before. I sat there just below the rustling canopy, hissing myself and staring at the distant base where the splintered wood rose, fully expecting at any moment to see someone crawling rapidly up the pine towards me. Instead, all I heard was the wind whistling in the leaves above me and below me, and occasionally snippets of birdsong. It was about 2 hours before my mother got home and found me after much worried searching, trembling, and crying at the top of the fallen tree.
So I'm just going to step in and say something real quick. This is written, again, this was 2013. This was written on 4chan, so one of the things about those older stories is that it's sort of it's not the same exactly, but it's sort of similar to what I would imagine a no sleep would look like nowadays, where the format is not of it's not classic literature, it's like on a post. It's like an online post that someone made. It's like, there's no credit author, it's just a username named Prozac 101.
Right.
So, just keep that in mind. I think that's why there are going to be... Although this guy edited it for the wiki, I'm not really sure. I mean, but maybe he left some of the spelling mistakes, and I know there was a few extra words. I think there was a moment where you read something that didn't...
Yeah, the grammar occasionally is a little so.
Right, but it gives the illusion that this person is just writing a post and not a thought out.
Yeah, and I think so far so good. It's effective. This kind of helpless and stranded, kind of dangling from the air, not knowing what exactly the threat is. Yeah, this is good so far. All right.
Although this incident spooked both me and Mother, in time I somehow recovered, exhibiting that naive hard skin of a child, although I never went as far into the forest as I used to, and never again even approached that fallen tree. Once when I was 12, I had the chore of taking firewood from the shed out back, just at the edge of the woods, and to bring it back inside the house. It was a tiresome job, and I always chose to do it at dusk, when the air was brimming with mosquitoes and a swampy fog that usually coated the lawn. By the time I had made my last round, I would sprint back to the house, spooked. One of my least favorite things about this job was that the shed was full of barn owls. If you've ever seen a barn owl's face staring at you from a dark roof corner, then you will know how uncomfortable that shed made me.
One of these nights it got mistier than it had ever been before. A thick silver fog covered everything and limited my line of sight to a short sphere around me. Even though the shed wasn't far from the house, I found myself feeling disoriented, and more than once I walked in the wrong direction, both times for some reason walking straight into the woods. By the time I had reached my last load, it was too foggy to see the street. My eyes stung in the moisture and it made my vision blur. Lurching forward, I managed to walk headfirst into a tree, doubling over and dropping all the wood I was bundling into my feet with a hard crunch. As I went to pick them up, with my foot throbbing pretty hard, I realized that the ground was too misty for me to see my own knees. I decided to head to the house, since we had more than enough wood for one night. However, it was getting to be pretty dark, and I couldn't make out any signifiers of which direction I was heading. Even though I cautiously walked for several feet in all directions, trying to figure out my position in the mist, I still couldn't figure out any point of identification. I couldn't even locate the fence or the gate, and the more I walked, the more I seemed to stumble into trees, pine needles, and mad crunching under my feet instead of dew-covered lawn. After a while, I finally realized that I couldn't even find the shed anymore. Cursing myself for being so dumb, while trying to ignore my thumping heart and sense that something else was at play, I became aware that I was lost somewhere in the fringe of the forest. Screaming out for my mother with the loudest possible volume was only met with the resounding silence from the depths of the mist all around from where I stood, affirming that I had wandered too far from the house to be heard. As deep panic started to settle on me, I noticed a glimpse of something pink moving against the nearby pine tree. Coming closer, I saw that it was a ripped-out square of pink paper. On it there was an arrow pointing left. Looked vaguely like something my mom would make. I rationalized to keep me from getting lost. Looks vaguely like something my mom would make, I rationalized, to keep me from getting lost. I foolishly followed the directions set by the green arrow, shivering in the increasing cold.
I kept walking for about 5 to 10 minutes before needing to stop to take a breath. My heart was pounding so fast it was beginning to hurt. As I was sitting down, however, I spied what appeared to be another note fluttering on a nearby truck. I noticed that this one was embedded with a long nail. It bore another arrow, this one pointing up, and a small sloppily written note that said, "This way." Despite my increasing panic, I convinced myself that these notes were my only shot at getting back before nightfall. I was desperate to get the hell out, and my brow was cold with sweat, so I followed the green arrow to a point where I could just dimly make out another spot of pink, up an incline of collapsed stumps and leaf litter. At this point it was getting pretty dark, and I had to strain both my eyes just to see a few meters ahead of me. Following the green arrows, feeling less and less sure of where I was, I stumbled through the woods, groping out in the mist to feel for trees, although I was terrified of something unseen grabbing my arm. I came across the third green note, which had another arrow pointing up again. This one led to an increasingly steep slope that I didn't recognize being anywhere near my house, and with a poorly drawn smiley face right above it. At this stage, I became too freaked to cope and started to cry there a little. As I slumped against the pine stump, The possibility that I would be out in these woods all night was beginning to sink in, like a syringe being driven into my veins within my arm. I caught a glimpse of another pink square in the near distance, squinting hard, unnerved by these notes, all of which looked fresh and without a sign of decay despite the previous week's non-stop rain. I read it from afar.
What I read made my blood turn cold. I stood to my knees, dead silently, wobbling on them in fear. My ears were sensitive to any tiny prickle of noise in the mist. For a long time, I stood there in the rolling fog, reading and rereading the horrible note over and over again, before a snapping stick somewhere behind me caused me to sprint, blindly, twigs snagging at my ankles and cutting up my face as I ran. Written on the note in big green letters was my name. I felt like I was running for hours, all the while the rain and mist lapped the back of my neck like the decaying breath of someone running right behind me. Somehow I made it back to the house. All the lights were off, and I struggled to find the keys for a moment. When I found them, I bolted indoors and quickly crawled into bed where I remained, unsleeping till morning. Mom just thought I'd come inside and gone to bed, and hadn't thought to leave the lights on. It was a miracle, aka some freakish coincidence that I even found the house at all. The final incident at that damn house was witnessed only by my mother. Up until then, she had never experienced any of the strange things as I had. Although we mutually shared the peculiar, oppressive quality that the house's interior had on us and its placement in the dreary, imposing woods. Although I was obviously never a popular kid, by living way out in the country in the opposite direction from everywhere else at my school, I did make some tight friends in my first year of high school. One of these friends, Amanda was her name, invited me over one night, and I accepted. My mother drove me out to the place, which was 3 miles away, then drove back home. The night went well. We watched a horror movie, suitably, devoured some pizza, and probably smoked a little pot. My mother went home alone, where she intended to get some writing done. She worked for a magazine at that point. It was about midnight when I received an off-putting text from Mom in all caps.
Is this a prank? I need to know immediately.
Thinking it was some kind of joke, I texted back, "Calm yourself, is what a prank?" Almost immediately the response,
Are you at the house?
Of course I responded no, though I was thoroughly weirded out. I didn't receive another message until around 3 a.m. when she told me to go to my grandma's in the morning and to not by any means dare go home. I remember those bleak torrents of rain the day I went to my grandmother's and how terribly soaked I was when I finally got there. It was nearly 2 towns away. I had to fight the temptation to go home and drop off my bags, but Mom's disturbing messages from last night were enough of a warning not to do so. When I arrived, Mom and Grandma were having lunch. At first, my mother seemed to be in some sort of a composed state, but when I got a better look at her, I noticed that all the color had drained from her face and she was slightly trembling. At one point, she even sent a small glass crashing to the floor after flinching at the cat brushing around her ankles. It wasn't until later that night, when my grandmother was sound asleep, that she told me what happened. She went further as to forbid me from telling old Grandma out of fear that it would horrify her suspicious soul too much. This was what happened the night when I was at Amanda's, as she described in lurid detail. My mother was sitting on the first story in the living room, where she sat on the couch by the fire, curtains open to the view of the sunset on the canopy, going over her latest draft. At first, it was so faint that she barely noticed it, but after a while my mother became aware of and vaguely irritated by tiny thumping noises near her head at the window. When she went over to investigate, she saw fat brown moths of a kind we often got at that place, buzzing madly in the glass. Reasoning that this was the cause of the sound, she returned to work, however, feeling riled in some way. It was when the noises started to get sharper and louder that she paid more attention and saw that rocks were being thrown at the window from the total blackness of the forest edge.
She saw them appear from the shadows of the bush, and then fall in an arc and bounce off of the window. Looking carefully, she could see small cracks from where the heavy ones had hit, right beside where her head had been moments before. Temporarily captivated, she tried to peer into the darkness enough to make out where the rocks were being thrown from. Then, with a startled shock, she jumped back from the window as she saw me standing half behind a tree right near the window, grinning wide and staring at her. My one visible eye stretched wide open, showing all the white. She barely stifled a scream, seeing her own daughter standing there, just staring and smiling. Not only did the figure not move nor blink, it was standing by one of the nearest pines, far from where the rocks were shooting up out of the bush. As they continued to do so in a loud downpour, my face unceasingly continued to press out at her, smiling. Thinking this was all some kind of sick prank, hence the later text, my mother shouted my name at the top of her lungs, frightened to the core. However, instead of responding, the mouth of the thing that looked like me behind the tree just started moving as if it were mouthing silent words really, really fast. Suddenly it turned its head to the side and seemed to be talking to someone else behind the tree, my mom said, who couldn't be seen. But she could see a formless black shape hanging out against the other side of the tree. The girl that looked like me kept staring at my mother and doing the silent speed-talking thing, then turning and whispering to the thing next to her. Then she would turn back and start up again. Then, breaking the monotonous spell, she suddenly pointed straight at my mother and started laughing. My mother screamed and fled to my bedroom on the second story, the only room with a working lock, where she shut herself in and sat at the far end of the bed as the rocks began to pitter-patter against the window downstairs, dry heaving and weeping in fear.
In my room, my mother said she did not feel safe. There was an awful smell and a weird humming noise in the walls, as she described. She tried to pray for a time before giving up and just listening to the rocks pelt the walls and windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, she caught the distinct, vibrant sound of the window actually smashing, and the weird, continuous humming. Listening more carefully, she could identify it as the softest hint of a mumbling voice. In absolute horror, she recognized the voice, and then, virtually too afraid to look, she tilted her head up to the closet door, where an awful white face could be seen staring right at her, mouth contorting and gaping in what sounded like highly sped-up whispering. The closet door was only a meter from my mother. It started to open slowly. In an unimaginable explosion of terror, she immediately bolted to the door, only to fumble with the lock as bigger and bigger rocks came crashing through the window, which burst apart in a spray of glass shards before finally getting out, running out of the house, completely keeping her eyes off the woods, getting into her car and driving off. She said that as she glanced back right at the end of the prolonged drive, she saw two unmistakable human forms standing at the broken bedroom window, watching as her car got further and further away from the house. This would be their final farewell, as my mother never stepped foot in that place again. As my mother told the story, she broke down into tears. I didn't doubt her, and I still don't. I honestly and fully believe that she experienced what she said she did. It was also quite clear that we were done living in that house once and for all.
I only went back once, with my dad, who I see very rarely now. He came from another state to help us move. Mom had already found a place in town and moved in. My dad and I just loaded up his truck with all that was left inside there. It was a silent, sunny morning when we removed all the stuff and emptied the place. I wish I could say there was some closure, some final spooking to cap it all off, but there wasn't. It was just a relief to be out of there. There was, however, two things worth mentioning. One, when we checked the house for any signs of intruders, we found that several windows, including one in my bedroom and the kitchen, had been smashed and rocks were lying on the floor. And two, Dad went out into the trees for a bit to take a leak. When he came back, he asked how long we had the swing set for. Needless to say, we never had a swing set, so I was fairly unsettled to discover that in the week since we'd been gone, someone had assembled a rope swing set from one of the highest branches of the old pine over the ridge, against which was the fallen log I had stopped climbing many years ago. It was obviously new rope, and a nicely polished, sanded-down wooden seat at the base. Dad, wanting to keep my mind from recent events, he doubted the affair and thought my mother was mentally unstable, said that the neighbor probably set it up, not realizing it was on our property. Of course, he knew as well as I did that we literally had no neighbors for at least a mile in any direction. There were no houses in all that space, and never in my time living there did I ever see any other signs of human habitation. But I let it all go, and was pleased enough just to say good riddance to that horrible place as we drove off for good. For the most part, I found it best to try and forget what happened in that place. Sometimes I just can't help but ponder it, though. It's been long enough now that I no longer feel scared talking about it, but for a long time I couldn't. Seeing as it is Halloween, what better time to share? My grandma recently sold the house to a new family, that being a young couple and their little son, shortly after we moved out, despite my mother's desperate insistence that it would be left empty. Now she refuses to talk about what happened altogether. I'm less anxious about it, although sometimes I can't help but let my imagination get the better of me. All I can do is think of that old house, the fallen tree, the new occupants, and the swing out back gently spinning in the breeze as the little boy toddles oblivious towards it. And that was Out in the Woods by a 4chan user only known as Prozac101.
I would definitely need some Prozac if I saw that.
So what do we think of all this? I'll start with you, Dan.
Sure. I'm gonna pull a little influence from outside. It reminds me a little bit of Us, the Jordan Peele film that came out 2 or 3 years ago. There's something unsettling about like a doppelganger, right? Like the idea that there's somebody out there that looks exactly like you, right? And to come face to face with that individual and there's something wrong with them, or they have some kind of malicious intent, right? Or they're trying to take over your life. It's good. It's good. That's effective horror to me. The idea that, like, I mean, The Woods is like a classic horror locale, right?
Then there's actually, I think there is another popular story that I think was covered on Midnight Marinara involving something with the woods. I forgot the name off the top of my head. But it's a common
The Woods is a trope, right? And it's fine when you use it like this effectively, kind of the idea of, like, there's maybe people in the woods. I do like, what I really like is the notion at the end, right? That they put a swing set up because they were trying to get the narrator and she climbed up in the tree and they couldn't get her. So they were smart enough to know to put a fucking swing so that the next little boy that goes in there, or the next person that goes in there, they'll easily be able to grab.
Tracking their victim.
And I love that. I love that intent that these things are getting smarter somehow.
Right.
But yeah, very interesting. And yeah, definitely creepy. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. I read up to I think I stopped reading this on my own when it got to after, I guess, what you would call the first act, where she initially gets yelled at by that strange
voice,
male voice. And maybe the male voice was able to copy her from afar, and that's why this creature, this anomaly was able to.
Yeah, well, she doesn't. She doesn't recognize the voice, which is interesting. And there is this. It feels like there's some kind of mythical aspect to it.
I'm sure.
Almost like some kind of forest creature, like a fae or
Is it
fairy.
weird that, like, it has that feeling to it?
Yeah.
But I'm trying to look at it as, let's say this did actually happen, right? What aspects are being, like, exaggerated, right?
Right.
Maybe there isn't anything supernatural about it. Maybe there's at least someone living in the woods somewhere, right? Now I'm probably thinking about, like, well, the person looked just like them. How many times I've heard parents like, I saw someone at the mall that looked just like you.
Yeah, but not just, well,
you know,
I see what you're saying.
They also knew the girl's name.
Right. They knew the girl's name, and they
they
lured her
house.
Right.
And, I'm sure, like, many
but
times...
But they were also luring her further into the woods. When she got lost, they were putting stickers, they were putting arrows up to try to get her.
But I'm saying it's all plausible, it's not, it's nothing too supernatural.
From our common understanding, this isn't plausible, but maybe something in the woods, the implied thing.
Well, you're saying that it might not have been the daughter, but somebody looked like her and her mom was mistaking it.
Okay. I'm gonna get really weird about this.
Sure.
Like, I feel weird saying it, but, like, maybe, like, it was a guy who was, like, a pedophile type thing, and he was trying to get, like, a new girl, and I watch a lot of SVU.
Right.
Maybe he was trying to get someone that looked like the other girl, so it's like, oh, they look very similar.
Yeah, but there's multiple people involved in this. Because there's several people throwing rocks.
Several? I thought it seemed like it
also,
was, like,
the other
girl.
2 or 3 people.
Oh,
there's at least, she said she's seeing multiple rocks being thrown from the bushes.
Also the other problem...
So there's people.
Oh, yeah, they were throwing rocks from one area, but then her doppelganger daughter was in another area.
Right, and who the fuck was in the closet?
Right, also, the rocks are...
and there was somebody behind the tree.
The other thing is the rocks are of different sizes. As it keeps going, the rocks are getting bigger and bigger, so how the hell is that happening? Plus, where are they... getting all these larger rocks. I guess you can't get them from outside. But
well, they're roaming around the woods. They're probably, like, picking them up. But it's like, what is the intent?
But the other thing is, part. Like, again, even if it was something like what Kevin's saying with a pedophile, then why would you even go after the mother at that point? Because clearly something went into the house to go after her specifically.
Right, because the guy was in the closet in her bedroom, in the protagonist's bedroom.
Right.
I don't know. It could be that they were just they were tired. They were going to just attack the mom and take her. Who knows?
I guess, yeah. I mean,
but
it's possible.
I get pen pal vibes from this as well.
I do. Yeah.
I was thinking that too.
Right.
With the,
I guess the one thing I wasn't. I think the reason I think supernatural is because of the beginning, where like she hears a voice. Clearly
it's a disembodied voice, right?
But like it's underneath her and she
Right.
can't find it. And
Right.
it's like, like where is that coming from?
Right.
Be one of those crazy families come out of the boonies,
Right. Well, they said
Get
there's nobody from miles around, as far as they know, right? What really would have affirmed any kind of theories that we had is if there was a doppelganger mom, right? Like straight up us, right? Like she's talking to somebody behind the tree, it peeks out, and it's the mom. Like that would be the linchpin for it, but we don't get that, which is fine because there's a little bit of ambiguity. And there's clearly an evil intent there.
Let me get this out of the way. There is the one thing about this story that I do not like.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens, and again, I'm not going to crap on the story too much for doing it. I understand why this happens, because you feel the need, you want to explain everything.
Right.
But, like, you think about the logic behind this. This woman has been through a traumatic event. She drove home, literally to her mother's house for comfort and to get the hell away from there. And this daughter describes her as shaking,
right,
disturbed. She drops a small glass when the cat grazes her leg because she's that freaked out.
Right.
And only when Grandma says, and this is the first in this paragraph, it says, where else? It's like, this was what happened the night I was at Amanda's, as he described in detail. And like it starts with like, she was sitting out the first story in the living room. She sat down on the couch by the fire, and the curtains were open to view the sides of the cabinet, going over the latest draft. Like, is she really describing like all the tiny little details that she's going?
Yeah, I think that's.
Or is it more like, or is the exclamation more like there was people in the woods, they're throwing rocks at me,
right,
and one of them looks like
work.
you.
Right.
I thought it was a prank.
Right.
And I'm not saying
but that's not literary. You know what I mean?
I know.
It's got to be.
I know. I guess from my perspective,
because it would be a paragraph and you'd be bored.
Why do you? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I do find it. I found the amount of detail in the specific part where like every little thing.
I suppose.
But I guess this is why usually the horror happens to the protagonist and not like the protagonist's like mother, because now it's like the mother has to explain to the protagonist what's going on.
The horror happened. A piece of the horror happened to the protagonist, right? But the essential scare happened to sort of outside of...
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying it's much easier to describe it as it's happening versus recounting it.
Right.
And you're basically recounting the final act. Right. It's like it happens... It's like if this was a movie...
It happens off...
It would happen off screen, and then someone would have to tell you what happened. And that's the climax, which is...
that's a little... Yeah.
Very detailed. But there was one part where my jokey brain went to where the girl was smiling, the doppelganger, we'll call her, was smiling, and then the mother smelled the stench, like a bad smell. I'm like, I wonder if that's gasoline. Maybe that's Jessica the killer out there.
Jesus, who's that?
I mean, Jeff the killer, but female.
Jane the killer.
Jane the killer. Sorry.
I guess the white face. Yeah, you do think about that stuff.
Well, I heard the smiling. What got me thinking was, they're smiling, and now there's a smell in the house.
But that's an interesting idea, because I took the smell of something like rancid and dead and rotten, but it could have been them trying to smoke her out. You don't know.
But also,
that's an interesting idea.
I did a quick little look up. Also, with gas leaks too, they tend to have like auditory delusions.
You're saying that it was a hallucination?
They said that there's auditory delusions, and you have a sense of dread.
Sure.
From
if we want to take it in the most literal sense possible.
Because the father, man's father, saying, she was being delusional.
Yeah, but that's just her dad. Clearly they're separated, right?
Well, obviously.
So the dad's like,
well, yeah, but that it feeds into that narrative of, oh no, she's just seeing things, because that's the reason why I left her, was because she's seeing things, and we weren't she was there, but everyone else wasn't there for that to see what's happening.
It's a lot to infer, though. Their entire
it is
relationship.
A lot to infer, but at the same time,
there's nothing in the text to really indicate what we understand that there's some kind of strain, but we don't know the history of mental illness of the mom or what the relationship is with the dad really.
Well, to be fair, the only person
I can see a divorced dad being like, she's probably full of shit.
Yeah, but my counter argument would be the daughter experienced the horror in the woods away from the house.
Right. And also,
here's something interesting though, Dylan.
because this was another point I was going to bring up.
But it's
I got my negative stuff out of the way. I absolutely love how this ended.
Yeah.
Because 95% of these creepypastas, there would be another act where she would be like, I had to explore the house for myself.
Right.
And I went all by myself,
Alone,
with a flashlight.
It ended like real life. Like, no one went by the house anymore.
Right.
Well, no. Well,
or when she went back with the dad, something would have happened with the dad.
She came back, but with her dad, with the purpose of taking the stuff out and not exploring it.
Right.
Like, she didn't want to go in the
you're
woods.
absolutely right. A shittier
so she
story
bought
would do
she
that.
bought someone with him. It was probably daylight.
Right. But you said it was
and
summer
someone's
morning.
with him. A parent is with her. Right. Like, it ended in a very realistic way, and it also confirms that the mother wasn't completely full of shit, because when they get there, the windows are broken. There's rocks of all different sizes in the house.
So how would it be an hallusion if there's actual physical damage to the house?
My only...
Unless you're saying she broke the windows.
Well, I was going to say
herself.
she could do that and make it look like.
So she also just built a swing set in the woods and just completely forgot about it.
Well, if
she also got in the closet and dressed like her daughter, like some real like, reverse Norman Bates chick.
Well, because I think about going back to when she had the daughter had her experience.
Came out 67.
When the daughter had her experience, wasn't she alone too?
Yeah, but she was in the woods.
She was in the woods, but she was alone.
But her mom wasn't home.
Her mom wasn't home, but her mom was over there.
But you're right.
No one else was there.
Yeah.
Her mom
it just
had
seems unlikely. No, because there was no, because there was a thing where she clearly heard a man's voice yell at her in the beginning when she was stuck in a tree for 2 hours until her mother came looking for her. Right.
So it just doesn't. What you're saying?
But her mom didn't see.
No, the mother went to get her. That's
the mother went to get her. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but didn't see what was there. Well,
neither did the girl, and she was standing there.
Right, but if the mother
her.
was the culprit, why would she? First of all, she has to imitate the sound of a man. That's the first thing. But even if that is somehow reasonable, she would have had to leave her. She would have
what you were saying before is word of mouth. It's not like
what do you mean word of mouth? It's not.
Hold on. Let him talk.
But what evidence do you have that you can confirm that it actually was happening? Besides hearing it from her and hearing it from the daughter.
Well, because
that's the thing.
Yeah, but this doesn't come off as an unreliable narrator's story.
Oh no, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying because the narrator said father brought this she's a little bit senile, there's a reason why she's like, oh, you just.
But he didn't though.
He didn't though. That's the thing.
He didn't. The exact.
The story I'm bringing up in
the
story I'm bringing up in the beginning has nothing to do with the dad. What happened was that...
Right, you're drawing a lot from, one sentence.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, because she would have had to climb up the tree after hearing this loud male voice, stay there for 2 hours, and the mom comes looking for her. So are you saying the mom's behind it, or the dad's behind it, or someone else is behind it?
You're saying it was all hallucinations, but again, the girl experiences the horror out in the wood twice actually, because she wanders back out there...
And then the mother
sees her name, right?
And then the mother
experiences. But then the mother experiences it in the house, so it can't be that,
right? Either they're both crazy,
right?
Which I guess is possible,
yeah.
Or there are. But the thing is, there were rocks of different sizes breaking through windows, and I assume the rocks are found inside. It's not like she's throwing the rocks out from inside the house. She's
Dad wanted to keep my mind from recent events. He doubted the affair. And thought that my mother was mentally unstable. That's it. That's all you get. They're not talking, but you're not talking about a history of mental illness. An event like this, if I called you tomorrow and told you that this happened to me and we didn't read the story, would you fucking believe me? You'd think I'd be fucking nuts. Right. So it's got nothing to do. You're inferring a lot from almost nothing.
Right.
Well, that's the thing. That drew me to it, because I'm like, all these things are happening, and what could cause it. And you guys are going off the whole, these crazy people and stuff, which
I wasn't saying crazy.
Well, it's a very supernatural idea,
supernatural,
and you're looking at it like a very literal.
Like if the dad's the culprit or something, I would believe that.
I'm not saying like that.
Dylan's saying that everybody's fucking hallucinating because there's a gas leak in the house.
Right.
Not everyone's hallucinating, but like that. The second part, I was like, this seems like a little.
What if we're hallucinating?
Yeah, we're all hallucinating.
Oh, this is
You're not
Speaking
here.
of,
you're not here. You're not here, and you're not here.
I wish I wasn't here.
All right, you two. What do you think, Caitlin? What do you think?
Yeah,
Let's start with you.
I mean, it was creepy enough because, I know when I was little, at least my brother used to see people in his room. So.
Oh, like night terrors?
He's wacky.
No, not necessarily night terrors, because my mom swore we had a ghost in our house. But like,
Cool.
But like he wouldn't be like malicious or anything, like throwing rocks. He'd be like just looking over.
I'll explain this.
Just be like looking over and like protecting. But like it's still creepy to think about.
Here's why I gave you that look. I mean, you guys can't see it, but I gave Caitlin a look because, like, normally with like, oh, there's a ghost in the house door. It's like it was like, oh, it's a house that's been around forever. Your grandfather built the house.
My grandfather
so, like,
built our house, but my mom had a best friend and he died in a car. I think it was a car accident, and like. He loved that house. He loved my grandma. So
you always hear stories about that.
Yeah. So he was never malicious. He was protecting
like
people.
my grandfather, he passed away in his like condo a couple towns over, like 10 years back. But every Sunday night, because he used to come over for dinner at my folks' house, and every Sunday night, just as we're about to sit down for dinner, the lights would flicker a little bit. And that was my mom's like, oh, he's with us. So it's like the whole spiritual thing.
You know what? It's like, it just did that. I know we're going to get a little sidetracked, but like for our wedding, this is me to be a little crazy now. For our wedding, we tried to record it.
Right.
So, we counted for everyone, right? There was like 20 people. We didn't count for you, by the way. But, fucking cracker. Anyway, but
we went to brunch the next day and I paid, so eat shit.
I mean, I basically did. That food was terrible.
Fuck off. You wanted to go to the diner.
Anyway, we accounted for everyone, but Tyler, who was the cameraman, had the one seat, right? Yeah. And there was an empty seat next to him. And I've heard that, like, with supernatural things, like spirits, whatever, can mess with technology.
Yes.
I know when
electromagnetic fields.
So I remember a few years ago, too, I went to a funeral, and we had I was like, why would you whistle right now? Of all times, like, we're not recording. No, but, like, I went to a funeral, and we were setting up, like, we tried to take pictures, and for some reason the camera shutter wouldn't go off. My computer, which has never done that before up to that point, restarted right then for no reason out of nowhere when I needed it to stay on. Yeah. But now the video came out very weirdly, like choppy. We tested it a few times and everything came out right. Now the only open seat there was next to Tyler. So I like to think that it was my grandmother who passed that came to the funeral and sat at the only seat.
It sounds the
video.
At the wedding.
At the wedding. What did I say? Funeral? Sorry, at the funeral. It's the same thing.
Freudian slip.
It's the death of Kevin's singleness.
Yeah, it is.
No one can see
the last decision a man makes is I do.
Those are my last words.
Oh man. So you're saying wait. So you're saying what we have to do is we have to have everybody who listens to this do a Kickstarter for us to pay for a hotel for your family to live in for a couple days so that we can do a live stream of us ghost hunting in your folks' house.
What?
That's what I want.
Where are we? Okay, back to In the Woods. We're out of the woods. Whatever.
Caitlin, did you also think there was an intruder in your house one time?
We are out of the woods right now.
We're out of the woods.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll point that out.
We're balls deep in the woods, John.
Caitlin also thought there was an intruder in her house once, so nice. It was the ghost.
It was the ghost. It was the ghost. Anyway, back to doppelgangers and gas leaks.
I think this, and I guess I could put this up if I remember to edit this in, but, like, even the image makes a little more sense now.
Yeah, it's creepy.
Like, I like to imagine that maybe it's not just the one doppelganger, but there's, like, several doppelgangers.
Well, that's why I got the us spot.
Right. Because how are they throwing so many rocks? Right. In the kitchen, the bedroom, everything.
Clearly,
there's a lot of... What?
That's what it is. They're earthbenders.
Earthbenders.
Shout out to Avatar.
It's freaking like a
and not that James Cameron bullshit.
But no, really, I think that there could have been like a house surrounded by doppelgangers that was chucking rocks.
What if in the, and this, I'm just fucking around now, like in the woods, like deep in the woods, it's the exact same house, and they're just living in it, and they're like, they come out to try to stop their doppelganger self.
Okay, I figured it out.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
They're all goatmen.
Oh, yeah, no, that makes sense.
All they want to do is play.
It's all Goatman.
No.
Tune into episode 30-something, the Nazi Goatman episode.
We can't put our own references in episodes.
You absolutely can!
I don't want to.
But John, it was just a dream.
It was just a dream all along. The whole thing was just a dream. According to Dylan, that's true, because it was a gas leak, so she got knocked unconscious, and she dreamed it.
The pine tree is actually a metaphor for heroin, so they're actually tripping. You know?
This was like a scary version of a supernatural scary version of Requiem for a Dream. Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And at some point they played Slender Man.
Oh,
I got that reference.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think all in all, this was a nice, easy story to come back to kind of cut our teeth again. I was genuinely worried. I thought that you were going to pull out some bullshit.
I think
Showers Part 4.
Fuck off.
I mean, it is it's telling that like it is a Halloween story technically because this does take place on Halloween. But it's not like oh, it was Halloween, so this happened, right?
Yeah, it's like
it's just sort of some event, and also these things are happening like because obviously she's a little girl at one point. Then she's 12, doing some shorts.
Does she actually...
Then she's smoking pot at Allison's house.
Right, does she actually...
I
think she was aging as we were going, yeah.
Yeah, but did she ever confirm an age? Because I don't think she did.
No, but I think it was...
The only time she did, she said when she was like 14.
No, it says in the very first thing, when I was a child, it was just me and my mother.
And then the next one, when her mother had seen the stuff, she was 12.
she never says, there's no like direct thing where when I was,
I was a young boy,
right?
My father took me into the city to see a marching band.
Okay.
Did he say, "Son, when you grow up"?
Stop, for God's sake,
John. Going back to your point before, just as like a goof, I love the idea of like, how could we make this a shitty story? And it's like the girl, like, she goes back with her dad, and she's like, my dad was in the house packing up, and I decided I had to get one last look, and she sneaks in the woods.
She does say literally, once when I was 12.
Oh, okay.
When?
I had the chore of taking fireworks from the shit.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
She was, right, there's
because she was a child, then she was 12, and then she does, right, that's what I like. I like that. That's smart. It's showing aging without saying
but without
because now she's smoking pot with her friend Allison.
But
right,
that's Amanda. That's fucked up when you think about it. When you really think about it, these things have been trying to get her.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
For years.
Yeah, I thought that
maybe, or they're playing the long game. Whatever the case may be, they're out there for years.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right. Like I feel like that's like they've been learning over like her entire childhood.
Right.
Her whole childhood, these things have been studying her.
Right.
Because how often does she go in the backyard and play?
Right.
She probably didn't, obviously, like...
Well, so...
That was my point with how they know her name. It's like, you don't think that she went out, like, however far, and her mother comes out...
Played hide and seek with a few friends.
No, not even that, but her mother comes out and be like, Prozac 101, time for dinner,
Well, that's
probably heard their name,
that's interesting, too, because it's written well enough that the story escalates naturally, right? She's a child... And a voice screams at her, right? She runs out of the woods, never goes near it. And that might be, like, their boundary, right?
Right.
And they're like, fuck, they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and she never comes back. And they go, fuck, we gotta do something.
Well,
we gotta try to lure her in.
She goes back in.
But they lure her further in. Well, try to get them back, to get her back where she was.
So
she had some...
banjo starts playing.
Right.
And they go, yeah, boy! We got ourselves a birdie one.
Why?
So there's this.
I got Resident Evil 7 vibes
from the famous son. So there's an interesting idea I have in my head where these things like what's their fucking motivation? Because they start out deep in the woods, right? And they try to get her. She runs out. She doesn't come back. Then rather than just trying to get her, they try to lure her back when she's older. Then that doesn't work. Then they get desperate enough that a few years later, they basically raid the fucking house. One of them is in the house, in her closet, ready to take her.
Maybe there is a desperate
So what the fuck is happening? What are these things?
Also, when they failed, they built a swing.
Right. To try to lure her back or lure somebody back.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And how desperate are they going to be by the time they sold this house?
Right. And what the fuck do they want? What do they want that they're like... That's so crazy.
Maybe, yeah. Because, there was a moment... Well, that's what it might be, because there is a moment where her doppelganger is looking back at some massive dark entity.
Right.
And starts laughing.
Right, what the fuck is that?
So maybe that's the big baddie, is the dark entity.
It's the entity.
It's the entity from Dead by Daylight.
It's a Wendigo. That's what it is.
You know what's crazy? The whole time, also, I was thinking of Legion's mask with the smiling face while we were reading this. I'm like, why do I have the whole vibe?
If any of you play, we've been consistently playing Dead by Daylight for several months, so we're all fucking horrid out.
There's something I wanted to bring up because I thought certain things were clever. Like, let's take it as this whole thing's bullshit, and they wrote this story, right?
Right.
Some clever things I thought they did was obviously like not end it with like a Russian sleep experiment where she comes face to face with her doppelganger, and she's like, "Well, our plan is this," you know. But
or we are the darkness and the shadows, right?
And the most supernatural aspect of the story does not involve the person who posted the story.
Right.
They distance themselves from it so they can be like, "Oh, this is what happened to my mother." You know,
Right.
but what happened with me is a little more plausible.
An unreliable narrator.
Exactly.
Because now it's like she's like, yeah, this happened, and I said I don't want anything to do with it. I'm out. Get me the fuck out of here.
That's the smart way to deal with it.
I'm going to tell you the story, but I'm telling you, there's not going to be an ending with any closure because I don't want closure. I want to live.
The closure, right? The closure is nobody ever talks about it again. We never go back.
Logically, we go and get out.
Right.
And the mother never sets foot in the house again because literally she is getting rocked.
It's kind of fucked up though that the mom, like. The mom was like, "You could go with your dad." Like, I'd be like, send that fucker by himself and bring his
hope he dies.
Right.
Well, she doesn't want. Well, I understand that she doesn't want to ever like set foot on the property.
But if that was me, I wouldn't want my fucking child going back there, especially when I know there's an evil doppelganger out there.
But like, you know, but at that
How
point,
she know the right child came back with her father?
Well, that's the thing. That's the plot twist. No, that would have been the stupid ending.
Oh,
that
you know what it is?
What?
This all happened to Prozac, but the one that came back with Prozac 101.
Right. Oh, right. Well, that's... You didn't... I don't want to spoil anything.
What?
We'll talk later. We'll cut the mic out.
What if, like... the dumb way would be, like, if, like, the dad gets back in the truck, but he looks, like, really weird.
Yeah.
So, like, he went in...
Yeah,
like,
that would be the
dumb
twist.
Oh, wait. Well, that could be kind of cool if, like, he goes in and something takes him and he comes back out and is like, "Hey, look at that swing over there. Doesn't that look fun?"
Well,
I don't think that's what he did.
No. There's nothing in there to really imply that. But that, again, that would be like the Hollywood twist ending. Because every horror movie, for some reason, has to have that gotcha moment at the very end that everybody sees from fucking 300 miles away. Because it's so overdone.
This is what I wanted to bring. The last thing I wanted to bring up was the story reminds me a lot of probably the best setting I've ever seen in a creepypasta was The Thing That Stalks the Fields.
Yes.
Where it's a story about this unbelievably, like, it's a very imaginative but very, like, unbelievable monster.
Just minimal,
right?
Yeah.
But it's, the location is this, like, random, out in the middle of nowhere, just some farm. Where no one visits this place. The guy lives by himself for weeks on end.
He's a farmer.
And there's just a monster that's putting a barrier around the haystack. And now in this story, again, like a lot of things, like with her growing up slowly over time, you know, it's never really said, but it's mentioned at the very end. Like, my dad said that maybe it was a neighbor, but I know for damn well we don't have a neighbor for a mile.
Right, miles.
So obviously they live in some, they live in like a rural area. There's not a lot of people, a lot of forest.
Right. So well, that's always the case with stories. That's another trope.
Right.
And for those of you who aren't familiar, you can tune into episode 36, The Thing That Stalks the Fields. I'm scared your friends. I had to look it up because I'm not sure what the number is.
Yeah, there'll be an annotation.
There'll be an annotation. There'll be a link
on the top right.
Be a link in the description.
It'll be right here. Oh wait.
Beyond these.
No, I'm pointing in the wrong direction. No, it'll be right here. No, sorry,
here.
no, right. Yeah, you're right over
Here,
there.
Yeah.
Oh. The camera's not rolling.
I'm getting anxious. Fuck off.
Getting anxious.
You're getting anxious.
No. I gotta edit over all this shit.
No, the thing to do in 2020 with YouTube nowadays is to talk about how most of the people who watch this video aren't really subscribed, and
where's me? Comment, like, and subscribe.
Click on the bell to get notifications when we actually upload a new video once every 6 months.
All right, this is all getting.
We won't bug you every 2 seconds. There'll be this new video.
All right, let's do this. Final thoughts on the story known as
Pumpkins.
Name. What?
No,
if you want to say it out of Pumpkins, if you want to give a thing out of 10, you can. Out in the Woods. Final thoughts. I'll start with Kevin.
Why me?
Caitlin.
I love
it. Dan.
Jesus Christ! It was an effective horror story. There was a really good discussion. It was paced well. We all had our own theories, which I always like. And yes, I think it was incredibly effective, and I'll probably have a panic attack driving home tonight, thinking that my doppelganger is sitting in the back.
So you agree with the notes guy?
Don't look.
Who's like, this story is the kind of, and I can see that. I can see that this is the kind of story where where it kind of sticks with you for a few days after you read it.
Yeah.
Which is really effective. Dylan.
It's good. Nah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I think I'm looking back at my my analysis of it. I think I took a little too literal.
That was interesting.
Too literal though. As I'm looking back, I'm like, nah, they can bring up some good. You guys brought up some good counterpoints, but other than that, I did like the setting. It was nice. It was nice to come back to and all that. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it for what it was with all the into the woods and then the house and all that stuff.
It's I mean in a good way. It's a little simple.
Yeah.
Like so it's like you feel like chocolate, right? Whether you want like a Snickers bar or
it's a very timely reference.
Oh yeah, let's do as a candy analogy. No, but like if you want chocolate, right? You get Kit Kat, you get Butterfinger, whatever. But this was just a Hershey's bar, which there's nothing wrong with it. There's no gimmick to it really.
Doesn't even have almonds in it.
It's no almonds.
Plain
it's milk chocolate, and it's you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. It kind of reminds you how good chocolate is.
It does its job.
Exactly.
Right, and I think the best stories that we've read are the simplest.
Yeah, like
stories.
Wide Mouth was very
the
simple.
most effective
Funny Mouth
stories, right? Are the best stories.
No, I'm thinking of a different one. Funny Mouth. Which one's the one that's like a message?
Oh, that's Wide Mouth, the AOL Instant Messenger.
Yeah, well, that one has a...
No,
that's
Funny
Funny
Mouth.
Mouth.
That's Funny Mouth. Is the AOL.
Oh, that is Funny Mouth.
Wide Mouth is there. No, Funny
Wide
Mouth
Mouth is the one where William made the
cat.
joke about the gas leak.
Oh yeah.
Yo, that one has
furry
a
creature.
Yeah, the cat creature.
That one has a gimmick to it. That's like dark chocolate though. It's got a bit of a gimmick, but
that's
not
Hershey with almonds. Yeah.
Not enough
Something.
almonds.
You got a little something there. Not a surprise. It's there.
Caitlin.
Let you know it's there.
I liked it. The only part I didn't like was how it was written. It was hard to read.
Yeah, there was
a lot
some run
There's a lot
on.
of weird verbs that like they kept there's too many verbs that they use on certain parts that were didn't need to be used, or the grammar was weird. But I mean, it is
It's a little
written
wrong.
like
Well, they had
it's
a lot
an
of
actual. Shut up. They did. It's written like it's an actual post on like a Reddit site where you're just typing and just don't care what's happening. But
which we all hate, but this one did it pretty well. If it was a stream of consciousness thing.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back into the whole thing that this isn't really written to be it's not written as like a story. Well, it's made to look like a post on 4chan instead of like.
But this guy, whoever posted this in the Creepypasta Wiki, edited it and tried to do his best to make it more
right.
So anyway, yeah, I thought the story was effective. It was simple, it was effective, it was good.
Yeah, and I think my final thoughts are very similar to Kevin's. I think it doesn't do anything special, and that's. It's just very effective. It's
We've had special. Special is usually not good.
Right. And sometimes it is good.
Right.
But other times, this doesn't need to be said. I mean, as supernatural as it can seem, I think this is the most realistic way to write it. And it does seem like an experience that the author herself doesn't really fully understand. And they're not going to understand it because they're not looking for closure because of the reasons we've specified. And that's pretty much it. So, shout outs to whoever Prozac 101 is on 4chan, I guess. The actual editor is anonymous, so we don't know who they are. But I agree with them. I think it's a good story. And that's how we're going to end things. So this has been Scary Friends. It's good to be back.
Happy belated Halloween, everyone.
Happy belated Halloween. This has been me, John, a.k.a.
Happy Dia de los Muertos.
There you
That's
go.
what it was.
There you go, Day of the Dead.
All right, everyone. See you on the next episode. This has been me, Dylan, Kevin, Caitlin, and Dan. Have a good night, everybody.
Night,
Peace
folks.
out.